Now you all have a copy of this book. Now turn to page. Now, no laughing there. When I talk, I want no laughing. Right? Now turn to page 103. That's chapter 6. Now that is the most important chapter of the book, and I'm assuming you're all going to read it. Therefore it's not necessary for me to repeat what's in the book. And that's why I'm going to follow the Shakespearean precept of brevity is the soul of wit, which comes from Hamlet, I think. Anyway, you see in chapter 6, and I will just say a few words as to what's in chapter 6, so that you will all be inspired to read it afterwards. It's perfectly simple, it has no mathematics in it, and it's all very orthodox, and so there's no reason for me to repeat it all. Now you see on that first page a table of the Chinese current account as a percentage of Chinese GDP on calculations, and you'll notice, look at the figures, and it was a moderate percentage until 2004. In 2005 there's a big increase, and then after that every year there's a very big increase, an increase of the Chinese current account surplus. Now that's the heart of the whole thing. Why did that happen, and was it a good thing? Was it a good thing from the point of view of China, and was it a good thing from the point of view of the rest of the world? So we have really three questions to ask, which I discussed in the paper. First of all, why did that happen? What was the reason? The big change roughly in 2005. Secondly, was it a good thing for China? And thirdly, how did it affect the rest of the world? All that to be dealt with in 9 minutes, because I've already used up 1 minute. Right. Well, the most interesting aspect that I found was actually a question, why did it happen? And I did have to do some degree of research and thinking about it, and the answer wasn't quite straightforward. Now, if you turn to page 105, which is the next page, you'll see, I'm going to read out a simple sentence from it. There are two essential points in explaining why we had why this current account surplus developed. The first is the current account balance has not been planned by the central authorities, but rather has been an unplanned byproduct of a variety of developments and policies. And that's quite, to me, is an important conclusion, that I got to, and maybe I'm wrong. So I'd like to actually challenge all the Chinese economists here to carefully read this, think about it, and send me an email and tell me whether you agree with that conclusion. So I'll repeat the point because it's quite central. It isn't that the Chinese authorities decided they wanted a high current account surplus. It was really the first time it was really high, was in 2005, nor that they wanted it keep on being high. Rather, it was a byproduct of other decisions they made, and of other events that were not predicted or predictable. Now that's quite important, because that raises the question, what is the role of the exchange rate? That's the next point I want to mention about. Now I've got details here on the next page of what was the explanation, the various explanations. It wasn't one explanation, the micro explanations, various explanations, but of course the exchange rate does play a role in the whole thing. Now the broad position is that until 2005, the currency was fixed in value to the US dollar, there was a nominally fixed exchange rate. And after that, in 2005, there was a change of policy, imposed possibly in response to pressure from the United States, which led to some moderate appreciation in the next few years. The details are here, right? So there wasn't a big appreciation in exchange rate, but in the very same period that there was a mild appreciation in exchange rate, with the rate still fairly rigid, there was actually a big increase, further increase in the current account surplus, and so we can conclude that the reasons the surplus changed clearly didn't have much to do with the exchange rate. But it's also true that if the authorities really wanted to transform the surplus into a deficit, say, or into making it zero, it could be done by sufficient exchange rate appreciation. Could it be done? It wasn't done. Well, then you have to ask the question, which I'll discuss in the next page. You have to ask the question, well, what motivated this desire to keep the exchange rate more or less fixed, or to avoid any fluctuations? There's strong pressure from various Americans that there should be a floating rate, or that there should be a big step appreciation. Well, the answer to that is essentially given by a short article that I read by, where is he? Mr. What's his name?
What's his name?
The famous man. Yes, Fan. Where is he? Is he here? Yeah, Fan, yes. And he has a short article which explains the Chinese point of view. I more or less quote it and then I elaborate on it. And the basic point is quite elementary. The Chinese authorities, first of all, want to help exports. They want to maintain or increase employment in the export industries. And they want stability. In general, they want stability. Harmony and stability all goes together in China, I gather. So that on that principle, which Mr. Fan laid out, I conclude that that's the explanation for the exchange rate policy. So we've explained the exchange rate policy, which is simply a more or less stable exchange rate with some modest appreciation for reasons that he gives and that I've quoted. And secondly, there were other factors that I haven't told you about because there isn't time, but you can read about it, that actually explain the rise in the surplus. The main point is it wasn't a planned surplus, it was an incidental byproduct. So that's the first part of the thing, right? How many minutes have I got? The second part of the question is this good for China to have this big surplus? Well, on that it goes on quite brief, and I can be brief because it's been endlessly discussed. The big question is, why should China accumulate large foreign exchange reserves, and particularly put them into US dollars, and the real value of these reserves declines because the dollar is likely that it has declined, it's likely to decline further, and so on and so forth. Can that possibly be good for China? Well, the answer is, up to a point, yes. And as I say, it's good to have good reserves so as to avoid the kind of crisis that other Asian countries have, and then you don't have to go right into the IMF and be told how naughty you are because you have to borrow, you see. Now, you see, you're naughty if you have a surplus. If you're China, the Americans will say it's bad to have a surplus, but of course if you're Thailand or something, it's bad to have a deficit, you see. So the precaution against that situation is a case for some build-up of foreign exchange reserves, and the facts are all in here somewhere. Now, but it's gone too far. It does seem to have gone too far. Wouldn't it be better to use it more for consumption or for certain kinds of investment? But I haven't gone into the details of that because that's really, you have to know more about the domestic economy of China, and you have to know about the political economy of China. If they had these further resources available, how could they be used to reduce poverty and so on? And that has been touched on in various papers. So I would just say that the fundamental issue there is, could those resources be better used at home than are being invested? Not all of them, but it clearly seems to me that the surplus has gone on for too long if you assume there are some useful uses in China. Well, now, I like to advance new theories with new names, because that's how you get prizes and honours, and so on. Mine never really made a big impact. But anyway, I decided I'd invent the packing theory. Packing theory. One of my articles. It's referred to here, of course. Now, the packing theory is the following, and then nobody else but me has talked about it, and I imagine it will die a death. This isn't too serious, so I'll tell you not to laugh, but